Hi! You may remember from my other video where I talked about using the occult in your tabletop role-playing games, that is, using the occult in the plot lines, the storylines, just general ideas on how to handle different adventures, campaigns, etc. In that video I expressed my desire, my intent on redoing some of my older videos. That is, videos related to scary things, horror themes. Some of those videos have very low quality when it comes to sound. So this time I want the sound to work a bit better, hopefully. So I'm going to start with a classic Mexican folktale, The Hairy Hand. This is my first scary video for the playlist that I'm going to put in the description below. If you haven't seen my other scary videos, please check out that playlist. But like I said, I am going to go through those videos, and those videos that I find lacking, I am probably going to redo them. But I still have a lot of ideas when it comes to content to be produced during this month and October to celebrate Halloween or Samhain or all of that. Dia de los Muertos, of course. And I have received a couple of suggestions, well, more like a concrete suggestion by the part of one of my viewers. But this time I am going to talk about that story, The Hairy Hand. And as you can see, I modified the background like when I make videos during the month of October, trying to give a more scary or occult, supernatural, paranormal atmosphere. It was quite improvised, of course. It's somewhat makeshift, but I still hope it will enhance the mood somehow. Okay, so The Hairy Hand. I am going to tell the two versions of the story, and I am going to give you my opinion from an occult philosophy perspective on how realistic this folktale or legend really is. Like I said, there are two versions. Let's start with the version that supposedly happened during the government of Porfirio Diaz here in Mexico. Okay, so during the government of Porfirio Diaz, there was this moneylender by the name of Horta. That was his last name, if I remember correctly. Back then, moneylenders were harassing people so much. You still have a lot of messed up moneylenders here in Mexico. They are criminals. But back then, they were in full swing. They were extorting people. They were charging more than was agreed upon. Sometimes they even made up charges to take away the money of people, sometimes their entire lives, of course. So moneylenders were a huge problem back then. And there was this moneylender by the name of Horta. So Horta was the stereotype of a thug, of a lowlife that had risen from poverty through crime. So not only was he in the moneylender shady business problems that were happening back then, he also had his hands on many other more nasty things, or so they said. Now Horta, like many lowlifes, like to be like all what you would refer to as chingy, that he had like all sorts of rings and gold rings and medallions. And one of his hands, I don't know if it was the right or the left one, he had a lot of rings in it. You know, like those really quiche, grotesquely baroque sort of rings that they just jump out of the hand because of how much gold and jewels they have on them, gems and all that. So he had these really rings in poor taste. I've always considered that those people that are constantly wearing gold chains, gold earrings, gold everything, it's like they are trying to fool people into thinking that they have gold within themselves. That is, what they lack of value in their souls, they try to disguise or present a facade of it through their jewels, their accessories. So Horta was no exception. And he was a very ugly man. He was the stereotype of an ugly man here in Mexico. In Mexico, you could say that the stereotype, or at least back then, it was a very short individual, quite obese or fat, and he was bald. And he had very grotesque features, like he was of a lower, what would you say, lower stock, genetically speaking, when two people, that is a man and a woman, that are incompatible with each other, that is of very different structural characteristics. When they have a child, he is born with, you know, like, oh, he has this huge nose and huge ears and very small mouth, or huge mouth and very small ears. Like, he kind of looks like a freak. So Horta was kind of like that. And so people despised Horta because of his crimes. He took the money and the lives of many people, and people started to enact a sort of curse against Horta. That is, they started to tell Horta, or even through whispers talking behind his back, that his hand, the hand that had the most grotesque rings, was going to fall off because of his, he was such a thief, taking things from people. And so it happened that Horta died. I don't remember the exact cause of his death, sorry. But he died, and they said that almost immediately his hand just shriveled. He lost his hand completely. His corpse, it kind of like the corpse discarded the hand. And so after that, they started to say that Horta's hand was seen through the graveyard, crawling like some sort of grotesque tarantula, some sort of spider. And well, there are also some variations, but they say that Horta's hand started to kill people in the graveyard. But then the hand simply disappeared. It stopped committing its crimes. So that's a bit of a mystery, and we will talk about that in a few moments from the perspective or the angle of occult philosophy. And now let's move on to the other version of the story. This version, it's probably my favorite version. And the first time I heard this was when I purchased this audio cassette with some classic Mexican tales such as La Llorona. And the narrator in that cassette, wow. He's probably the most terrifying narrator that I have ever heard. It was in Spanish, of course, a Mexican narrator, but his voice, he had this sort of tone, like, let's see if I can imitate it. He kind of talked, it's very difficult. He kind of talked like this, very, I don't know what sort of voice he had, but amazing voice. When I get to a particular part of the dialogue, I will see if I can bring out that scary part to talk in the most horrible way possible, you know, like that. So okay, let's get started. This happened during the times of the colony here in Mexico, and the protagonist, the one who told this story, was a noble Spaniard, that is, someone of noble blood from Spain. He came to Mexico to visit his friend, a Mexican friend who was, well, I'm not sure if it was a Mexican friend or if he was from Spain as well, but I think he was born here. So his friend was a dualist. The noble Spaniard was going to visit his friend that was this incredibly skilled dualist that had killed most of his opponents. Maybe some duels were on the terms of first blood, but he obviously enjoyed killing his opponents. So he visited his friend and they were eating and talking, the usual stuff. But during his stay, there were these rumors that there were these crimes happening. People would suddenly turn up dead with 5 holes on their throats, these black holes, as if some sort of claw had choked them. or just tore their throats apart. So he talked about this. No, he didn't. He was speaking with his dualist friend, just normal subjects and all of that. And suddenly his friend invited him to his weapons room, a room filled with all sorts of tools of death, that is, swords and firearms that he used in his duels. So obviously this guy was pretty skilled in the use of all sorts of weapons. And he was showing the noble Spaniard his collection, when suddenly the Spaniard saw this grotesque corpse hand, this just like a chopped off hand in a desk, and it was chained, and it was so horrible. It was like this brownish dark color, like it was rotten or something, and it had this really, it was very hairy, horrifying black hairs, like the narrator said something like, and the hand had these horrible black hairs, and kind of like that voice. And so when he asked the dualist about this, what the hell is this doing? why do you have this hand here? So the dualist said, "It used to belong to my greatest rival. I chopped that off with an axe. It is always trying to escape. You have to keep it chained so that it doesn't escape." He talked, I'm telling you, that narrator, maybe my voice surely doesn't recreate that sense of, it was just so horrifying, that voice, it's so nightmarish. But that's the thing, this dualist kept the hand of his greatest opponent chained because it was always trying to escape. Wow. So maybe the noble Spaniard thought that his friend was a little insane. Or maybe it was just like a trophy, and he, maybe it was some kind of a joke that, oh yes, it's always trying to escape. Maybe he had the chain like that so that it was like a funny topic in a very dark way of conversation. So the noble Spaniard went to his room to sleep, and during the night, one of the servants woke up the noble Spaniard. He told him that the dualist had been assassinated. So the noble Spaniard rushed to his friend's aid, or well, not his aid, but to see what happened. And when he arrived to his bedroom, there were all the signs of a struggle. Curtains falling apart, some furniture was found in pieces, like the dualist had some sort of scuffle, or he had been wrestling with something. And the corpse of the dualist was there on the floor with 5 black holes on his throat. And the noble Spaniard, he was obviously very brave. He went to the weapons room, and the hand was nowhere to be seen. After that, the murders started to get even worse. More and more people started to appear with holes, black holes on their throats. And they said that every now and then, even today in Veracruz, where it happened, there are sometimes people appearing with holes in their throats. I've never heard or seen any newspaper clipping, and I think I've only spoken with people who have been to Veracruz like twice in my life, and I've never seen such a case that there was someone that was killed with 5 black holes on their throats. So it is unlikely that is still happening in Veracruz, unless there is some sort of cover-up. I doubt it. And after the noble Spaniard was trying to investigate what happened to his friend, he kept having these nightmares of the disgusting hand crawling all over the place that he was staying at, crawling up the curtains, the windows, the walls, the ceiling. And then the story ends. They also said that they saw the hand over the corpse, sorry, the tomb, the tomb of the Dualist, as if it was mocking him. I actually got a bit like, what would you say, the shivers? Yes, like goosebumps. Because when I remember the voice of the narrator, it's such an awesome voice. And that's the end of the story. Now let's analyze both stories from an occult philosophy angle. The first story, it's very strange, very unlikely that when Horta died, his hand simply fell off from his corpse, unless he had some sort of weird disease, perhaps some flesh-eating bacteria, and the hand fell off because of that. Maybe he had some weird version of diabetes, who knows, because the hand simply fell off the corpse. Very, very weird. But if we were to consider, and just take all of this that I am sharing with you, perhaps you do not think that such things are possible. Maybe just think that this is a sort of fiction that you can use in your adventures and campaigns, in your role-playing games. But if we were to consider that people really, well, they hated Horta because of his evil ways, perhaps because they were all sending him this bad energy that, Horta, your hand is going to fall off. They sort of send this, like the way someone hypnotizes another person. They used this sort of, just like a current, like a sort of nervous fluid or mesmeric fluid of sorts, a projection of their intentions, so that the hand eventually, the forces that kept the hand together joined to the corpse. Maybe that caused the hand to fall off. Like I said, maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration, who knows. Now, this covers both stories, but the concept of a hand that is suddenly crawling about, that is the hand of a corpse moving about, that's quite unlikely, physically speaking. Let's stretch things quite a bit. Let's imagine that the hand perhaps was filled or injected or treated with some sort of substance that kept it somewhat fresh and only looks like a corpse hand from the outside. If it had enough mobility, could it be that some evil entity, some demonic presence, took control of the corpse hand and managed to move it about? I am saying that this is almost impossible because, well, like I said, if it's a corpse, the hand is already stiff. It would take like the most astonishing amount of energy. We're talking about a super demon amongst demons to be able to move the hand in so-called recorded cases of activity like poltergeist and all of that, usually related to demonic presences and beings from the Fey realm, or the what you would call fairies, but in folklore. They would need a very fresh hand to give it a bit of mobility, just like I said, stretching the truth as much as possible. Because in most cases, like I said, in poltergeist activity and all of that, they usually like just throw something like a knife, or they dropped a glass or some heavy object trying to injure or even kill the person, or they push the person down the stairs, all of that. So it is very unlikely that this this hand was crawling about like a Dungeons and Dragons crawling claw. What could have happened, either there was some sort of third party involved, that is a typical Scooby-Doo scenario where there is a human that is perhaps moving the hand about with some strings in the dark, and it looks like it's actually crawling. And remember, this is back then in the government of Porfirio Diaz, so many years back. They weren't exactly advanced in terms of technology compared to today. But there is also the possibility that Well, there are many criminals that make pacts with devils and demons. And the hand is quite popular in those cults. In many cases, you see how victims of criminals, criminal organizations, and all of that, they usually appear without heads and hands. You could look at things from a more scientific perspective and think, well, they do that so that they take more time identifying the corpse, because without the head and the hands, it takes a lot more time to identify someone. But the head and the hands have been used for a very long time, since I don't remember if it was either during ancient Egypt or in Greece, where they started to use heads and hands for all sorts of things, like for example the famous Hand of Glory that has been used in so many different movies, comic books, I think in video games as well. So maybe there was this sort of cult involved. Maybe they chopped off the hand of Horta and they started to spread the rumor that it had fallen off by itself, and they used the hand for some sort of ritual, and what people were seeing was actually some sort of trick enacted by a demonic presence, or let's say that the beings of the Fae were somehow involved. The very nasty, what you would consider like goblins and all of that, and hobgoblins in terms of folklore. Evil gnomes and all of those. They are, well, if we are to trust different folklore stories, fairy tales, the testimonies of people, when you talk to different people that supposedly has interacted with those that phenomena, they usually tend to play those ghastly tricks to frighten people. That is, let's say that some place is haunted. I think there's actually a haunted house in the US. I don't remember if it's in the barn or in the house itself, but they say that if there is this dark place that where you enter, there is this corpse-looking old man, and suddenly his head separates and it starts to chase after you. I remember a friend of a relative, he actually supposedly was cursed, and he said that during the night sometimes there was this floating head chasing him. Like I said, this could be interpreted in so many different ways, but if those entities, those energies, had some sort of glamour, some sort of way to distort the senses of the person, maybe they could produce those hallucinations. It was not exactly a hand that was moving, but a trick played on the senses of the person. Or maybe if we were to follow the occult philosophy angle, where we have different bodies in different dimensions, that is, we have a physical body, an emotional body, a mental body. It sounds a bit weird, but supposedly we exist in different levels. So it's kind of like those people that sometimes simply cannot release themselves from some sort of physical or mental problem, and it's because the problem is not exactly physical, it lies on another level, and they have to meditate and have a different sort of treatment, so to speak. But let's say that a person has an etheric body, and maybe the entity or the human, let's say evil sorcerers, chopped off the etheric hand of the corpse, and then they in some way manipulated it so that people saw it and they thought that it was actually a corpse hand. Maybe that could also be a possibility according to occult philosophy. Now let's move. I'm also quite suspicious of the rings that Horta had. Many evil practitioners, well, both good and evil practitioners, they can supposedly turn rings into talismans, powerful objects that bring you good fortune, and So what if Horta made some sort of pact with a demon so that his rings would grant him money in crime as a money lender and all of that? So what if that also had some sort of participation, that those rings somehow affected the hand, and it was either activated, for a lack of a better term, etherically, or like I said, it could have been the trick of some sort of other entity, a demon, or some sort of evil being from the Fey realm, all of that. Now let's move on to the other version. The version with the noble Spaniard and the Dualist. I find it really suspicious that the Dualist cut off the hand of his greatest opponent. It sounds like he was using it for some sort of witchcraft, or I don't think witchcraft is the appropriate term. I would say, because the term witch, as I have explained in some other videos, it has been satanized by the church, because witch comes from the words, Indo-European words of bitki and vice, which means wise one. It sounds a bit like an arrogant term, in my opinion, or arrogant title. I think maybe it's only virtuous when someone calls someone a witch as a sort of compliment. Because if you are saying that you are a witch, you are basically saying that you are a wise one. So, well, okay, let's say that some sort of foul sorcery was at play here. The Dualist used the hand for some sort of purpose, perhaps as again, like some sort of talisman to bring him luck in his fights, in his duels. Maybe that's why he kept it like that. And part of the ritual involved keeping the hand chained, because like I said in my video featuring graveyards, please check out my playlist in the description for my video where I talk about role-playing games and graveyards and cemeteries. Metal, specifically iron and steel, they are used in all sorts of operations to encase or entrap or even destroy or dissipate different entities. Like I said, just to give you a brief summary, that's why in graveyards supposedly you have this lich gate, you know, these metal fences or spikes to stop any sort of entity from escaping the graveyard. Not that your loved ones are going to jump out of the graveyard in search of victims, but a lot of evil practitioners, starting with religious people, they go into graveyards and do all sorts of what we call in Spanish brujeria, which is basically like dark sorcery, to summon demons and all of that. So maybe that's the purpose of the chain. It kept that entity trapped or locked in the hand. So like I said, it's basically a demon that was encased or entrapped in a corpse hand. Now here's where things get a bit fishy. The Dualist dying during the night, and the victims of people being killed in both versions of the story. It sounds like the work of a sect, of a cult. Like maybe there was someone that was killing people and puncturing those black holes to make it look like the hand had done it. I think that the color black added to the story, the black holes, is an exaggeration. So maybe there was this cult going about, maybe a friend of the Dualist, that the enemy of the Dualist, just maybe, like I said, the Dualist had killed his rival, and the rival had friends or family that wanted to avenge him. So what if they assaulted the Dualist when he was sleeping? They took the hand, and so that they could spread that panic that the hand came back from the grave to get revenge or something. That could be more likely. So when the noble Spaniard entered the room of the Dualist, there had actually been a struggle, a fight inside that room, perhaps against multiple assailants or just one very capable assailant, and he had killed the Dualist while he was sleeping, and he made it look like he had been killed by the hand. There is another more supernatural possibility. What if the Dualist had been possessed by a demon, by the demon that he was trying to control through the hand, through the corpse hand? And so he was possessed, he went into the weapons room, he took the hand and he hid it away or threw it outside or whatever, and then he choked himself while under the effect of possession. Maybe that's what happened. But what about the victims in the street? Either that was made up, or there was this demonic entity that was moving about the streets, possessing people and causing people to kill themselves, and after finishing the deed, it kept going to another victim. And perhaps for some reason, maybe because it was encased or entrapped in that hand, in that corpse hand, in the hairy hand, maybe in some way it was forced to move, trapped inside the etheric version of that hand. To give further details on that, in occult philosophy, it is believed that in more subtle levels, every object in the material plane exists in some way there. Not every object, but some objects. It's the reason why in different funeral rites, for example, the pharaohs and all of those, they were buried with their riches, and sometimes, depending on the place, their weapons and tools, etc. Because they thought that they were creating those objects, or rather placing those objects close to them. So when they died, they made the jump to the ethereal plane. They became effectively ethereal or etheric revenants, or astral revenants, depending. That could be a good subject for another video, talking about Egypt, because you could use that in Egyptian adventures or Egyptian themed campaigns. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments, please, if you want me to make a video of that. I think I will, but maybe you have some other ideas as well. So yes, maybe this demon was using the etheric version of the corpse hand, and some people saw it, some that had the, let's say, the sight or the development to perceive those energies, because that's the reason why sometimes people see things and other people do not see those things. If we were to discard hallucinations from a biochemical imbalance sort of way or explanation, that could also serve as for a video, hallucinations. So definitely I think that it's very difficult to determine what's real and what is false in both versions of the story. If I were to give you like my general idea or summary on what actually happened, I would say that it's maybe there was some sort of demonic activity, but many versions of the story, both versions of the story, many details were exaggerated so that people will feel a bit more scared. You know, it's good entertainment for those scary nights. So I think it's rather possible that many things were exaggerated and there was only some like a subtle undercurrent of supernatural happenings. I lean more towards possession, where the person started to choke himself or herself, and they thought, oh, it's the hand that it was crawling like a horrible spider and it jumped on the throat of the person and killed that person. If we were to think that there was something supernatural involved, something paranormal, I think it's rather a case of possession and the person killing himself or herself. There's also the possibility that a sect was involved and they were creating this facade of the murderous hairy hand. Who knows? Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like I said, I just wanted to give you some thoughts from the perspective of occult philosophy. Even if you don't think that is possible, I still hope that you will use this as a sort of fiction for your tabletop RPG sessions, adventures, campaigns. Wow, right now I am thinking of so many videos for this month of October. Maybe... Ah, yes, of course. The one I am really excited about is it's a very interesting take on, like I said, in the graveyard adventure or graveyard campaign, because it starts out as a horror scenario and turns into a sort of conspiracy. I hope YouTube doesn't shadow ban my video because I said that word, the C word. You know how YouTube is very selective, very totalitarian about which videos should be in the platform and such. Well, either way, thanks for watching. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending DriveThruRPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and please, please, please share your comments and ideas on more material for videos. I really want to give it my all in producing good content during this month of October and what is left of September. Scary videos related to role-playing games. There have been some people suggesting maybe you should review this horror game, but right now I am full with you just take a look at my reviews. I am constantly producing reviews. I am currently full, and so I don't think I'll be able to produce new reviews related to horror. But when it comes to these blog-like or informal sort of videos, like I am just talking with you as a friend would talk to you, like, hey, pretty tongue-in-cheek, these videos I am able to produce somewhat regularly. Well, once again, thank you, and see you later.